Up until about 2 weeks ago, I lived in a bubble of naivete, um, living my life only thinking of AI as something, kind of scary and doomsday-like, from the few articles I was reading about it, but not something I utilized in my work. And then I realized, it made me wonder. I mean, it must be being used in documentaries. I just didn't have, I hadn't seen much about it or read much about it, even monitoring all the discussions we have every day on the D word. So I went to Facebook and put up a post saying, so who was using AI in your doc work, and how are you using it? And with the thought that at some point down the line, we'd have one of these face-to-faces focused on it. And within a day, I had over 100 comments. And it was like, my mind was kind of blown because, it's being used all over. And I just want to read off a few of the ways it was in the comments it was being used. Rewrite a synopsis, brainstorm a film title, enhance audio, up-res, low-resolution photos, create an all-AI doc short on climate change, a tool for therapy and mental health with my participants, transcription and translation, writing narration, credit sequence designs, edit a grant proposal, archival research, list of festivals and awards, storyboarding scenes for recreations and animation, creating separate stems of music for remixing, creating AI-generated imagery for historical docs, and kind of as an all-around assistant and idea generator. Notice I didn't mention anything about getting funding or distribution, but that's another thing. Out of that discussion, a bunch of people, Philip and Basil came forward and were happy to be guest experts on this, and they have long experience in AI, and they're longtime D-Word members who go way back. So I'm just thrilled to have them on to dive into the weeds of AI. I thought we'd break this down into three parts. The first third, talking more about how we utilize AI in documentary filmmaking and the film industry in general. Then get into some of the deeper philosophical and alarming aspects of it, both in terms of copyright issues and image stealing and infringement, and what maybe some of the consequences, unintended or not, of AI are or could be, both in our field and wider. This is the end of civilization as we know it. And then we'd leave the last third and give those over to your questions. In preparation for this, I drew up a long list of questions, and then of course at the last minute, I went to ChatGPT and said, so what questions should I ask of these two experts in AI? And within like 5 seconds, it spit out 10 questions to ask that were far more in-depth and well-formed than my own questions. So I may throw a few ChatGPT questions in there, and Basil, Phil, see if you can tell the difference. So let me start off just by asking you guys both to talk about, just give a brief intro to, like, who are you and what's your experience in film, and just briefly how you've been using AI in your work. Phil, do you want to go first, and then Basil?
Sure. I, excuse me, I've been in film for 35 years or so, film and video, I would have to admit, since we're talking technology, don't want to leave anyone out. I remember a very, very early day, one of my very first jobs ever, excuse me, I was working at Maisels Films, and I was cleaning, as the new employees had to do. I was cleaning a reel of film that had just come back from someone who had rented it for a screening, and the alcohol going up my nose. And I met Doug, and Doug, you were there. And I think you were also cleaning a reel of your film back when things were on film. But prior to even filmmaking, I actually started out studying engineering, electrical engineering, and aerospace and physics and things like that. And so I've been following AI since those days, since the mid 80s. Marvin Minsky, who's one of the leaders of the field up at the Media Lab at MIT, had written a book on AI, and I remember reading about it. And I just remember when ChatGPT came out in November, I remember sitting down to play with it, and I was like, oh my God, it's here. The thing they talked about, actually more than they ever promised, is here in some ways. So that's very exciting. Bottom line is just, I'm a big computer nerd as much as a documentary filmmaking nerd. And as soon as the thing became available to me, it was yet another creative tool that we could use. I'll just end by saying, this is as transformative. If you thought the arrival of digital video was a huge revolution, if you thought the arrival of nonlinear editing or even editing on a computer was a revolution, this is actually, I believe, and I'll just leave it at this, that it's as important as the arrival of electricity on the planet. That's how important this is and how much it's going to transform our world. So I look forward to talking about it more.
Basil?
Yeah, I'm Basil. I've been in the documentary world for about 20 years. Some of the projects that I've done recently are a film called Drag Becomes Him about drag queen Jinx Monsoon, and work with James Longley on his film Angels Are Made of Light and Iraq and Fragments, and a number of other projects. I mostly operate as a producer. One of my current projects is a film about gay motorcycle clubs from the 1950s to the 1980s with director Adam Barron. I also pay my bills by working in video, like producing video for the tech world. So I'm an EP at a company called GitHub, who has their own AI offerings. Also done a lot with Microsoft and Amazon and a number of kind of companies in the tech space throughout. And I've been working with AI for much less than Philip, probably 5-6 years now. And mostly my interest in it came through, I'm really interested in how processes can be automated to help people get more time or do more things, especially in the indie filmmaking landscape where you're kind of wearing multiple hats. I've been like, how do you have more time to do that? And, you know, within the like smaller budgets that a lot of DIY independent filmmakers have. And then as those automation tools kind of grew, I got more and more interested, and my coding knowledge is pretty rudimentary. So I was able to play with some things when GANs were a thing, and early kind of like image generation and video generation models. But it wasn't until like Midjourney and ChatGPT and this kind of new wave of AI tools came out that all of a sudden it was like, oh, here it is. Similar to what Philip said, here it is. And it's accessible to more people right now through a web browser. And all of a sudden, you know, I think that we're in a new era of technology. I was talking to some friends around me and I said, remember when like smartphones came out and people were like, what's an app? And now like most people who are like, I wouldn't know how to live my day without using a number of apps. I feel like that's the same for what this is, like where it's a new baseline and new things are going to be generated off of it, new tools, new creative expressions, and it's going to be a really interesting to kind of see where this goes, but it's not going away.
So we'll talk about some of those apps now, but I want to reiterate for people who are coming in, I think we had almost 800 RSVPs for this, and people are still kind of flooding in. So they may have missed what Eric is saying at the beginning about one, a lot of you are already using AI, and we don't have time to bring you on camera later to talk about it. So if you, it would be great if you would mention what you're using in the chat, and maybe even how you're using it. And then, of course, everybody should save the chat in the before they leave at the end, which you can do by going to the bottom of the chat box, and where you put the messages, and you'll see 3 dots, and just click on that. Because also Julie is actually about to post a kind of long list of really helpful articles and ideas and lists that I came across or people sent to me while I was preparing to do this, and it includes a link to the D word, where we have our AI discussion, which will be ongoing from here on, and a continuation of what comes up today. And Basil put together an incredible spreadsheet of actually, do you want to mention it, Basil?
Sure.
But Julie's going to put this list. It's all together in one big long chat message. And I highly recommend you cut and paste it for later on.
Yeah, so I built a spreadsheet of tools, just AI tools for filmmakers. It's a Google sheet. It's probably incomplete, but as I come across tools, I've been adding them to it and trying to kind of say or categorize them into what they are. So I really encourage people to check out the spreadsheet, and there's a little Google form that you can kind of help add tools to it. So I'd love to keep building it out. I know that in the world of AI tools right now, they're coming out so fast, and there's so many of them that it's kind of hard to keep up. And this spreadsheet is by no means intended to be a full comprehensive list. It's just like things that either I've interacted with or other people have interacted with that seem helpful and workable.
And when Julie posts the long list of links, I don't recommend you go to them now. They go way into the weeds, but it'll be hugely helpful, I think, to you afterwards, and worth the price of this session alone, even though it's free. So Philip and Basil, let's first talk about, I think, probably the most commonly known AI usage right now that most people know who don't even know what AI is ChatGPT. So can we talk a little bit about that and GPT-4, and maybe what the differences are, and like how it's most commonly used?
Yeah.
You want to take this?
So ChatGPT, there's a company called OpenAI. It was originally founded by Elon Musk. He has since left the company and gone off on his own, as he is wont to do. But and they have been working on something called GPT for a long time. ChatGPT is basically version 3 or 3.5 of this thing they've been working on. If anyone's curious, ChatGPT is probably the worst name imaginable for any product ever. It's a tongue twister. It happens to stand for, and this is a test, Basil, tell me if I get this right, generative pre-trained transformer model. Every one of those things is a PhD behind every one of those letters. But I think what's important to note is it's interesting that it is such a bad name because nobody expected this to take off. They've been publishing GPT-1, GPT-2, then GPT-3. They put a chat interface. They thought the general public would find it more accessible that way, but they, as much as anybody, never expected this thing to blow up and become the most used app or service in history, and the fastest rate achieving that in history. Basically, what it is if you can Google it, ChatGPT, and you can go to the website. You will see what just looks like a text box at the bottom of the screen. That's it. Just like if you were going to send a text to somebody, there's a little text box at the bottom, and you can have a conversation with the artificial intelligence. What that means is there's a lot of, we can talk a lot about the philosophy behind what that means, but as far as what it feels like is you can literally ask it a question and you can get answers. And the huge difference is in the past, to search a computer required knowing exactly what button to press, maybe exactly what words to type in. And the huge revolution here is that these are what these programs use natural language. They can speak to you with natural language. You can talk to it as if you would talk to anybody. We've had Siri and Alexa and things like that before, but this is connecting that to like a much wider database. If you want, you can think of ChatGPT as just a super Alexa or a super Siri with a lot more knowledge. It can also do.
Is it connected to the internet? I mean,
no.
So it's not like a Google search in that way.
A big difference here is basically there's three main companies here at work. There's OpenAI, which created this ChatGPT, and then Microsoft invested in OpenAI, and they said, hey, we would love, because they have this second place search engine forever, this thing called Bing. They said, we would love to connect our search engine, Bing, to ChatGPT or to GPT, and basically the database that runs in the background and the interface. And so if you use Bing, you can get a combination of talking to the artificial intelligence. It'll come up with recipes for you. It'll write poems for you, but you're also searching the internet. Google, when you're using Google, you can also use their Bard. Basil, do you know if Bard is connected to the internet? I'm not sure. I think it might not be.
Yeah, I don't know. But I know that, I mean, with ChatGPT, like they have their language model stops at September of 2021.
That's right.
But there are other plugins. There are other plugins that are being created that does give ChatGPT access to the internet, but they're a lot of them aren't widely available.
They're not. Yeah, I don't think they're publicly available yet, but essentially they will be. So the thing is, though, so as far as searching for knowledge within ChatGPT, it's good for anything up to 2021. The amazing thing about that is it literally has every book that has ever been scanned, which just about every book that's ever been written is in its database. I've tried asking it, do you have this book in your database? Oh, yes. Can we talk about it? Yes. And it instantly knows it can have conversations with you about any Hemingway novel or anything by Aristotle or whatever. It just has it all. It also has the entire contents of the internet up to September 2021. So it's a pretty vast thing. It's just, it won't give you information about the most recent.
And it won't necessarily give you accurate. I mean, information as the models go further. Like if my great uncle was like a doctor in Oklahoma who wrote a bunch of books and created one of the first socialized medicine hospitals in the US. If I ask it who he is, even though there's articles and books and he wrote a book and all this stuff, it'll give me a compilation of various Shadids that have public, posts or stuff off the internet. So if you were using it for research and having it actually create your research for you and not checking it, you're going to have falsities in your research. But if you're querying it for other things, then it can be an amazing tool.
Yes, I saw somebody posted in the chat and they said, I think it was Lars said, ChatGPT is useless for research. And I would say, yes, it's just not, that's not what it's for. I find it works as a creative tool, honestly, to have discussions, or it can synthesize knowledge for you. It can summarize. It does have, and you can use it for research in the sense of broad-based kinds of things, ideas, themes, things like that. But if you're looking for real specific tasks and all that, Google is still your go-to.
Yeah, I would definitely use it to synthesize like transcripts of videos and transcripts of books or things like that.
It won't write your grant proposal for you, but it might give you.
It will.
It will write your grant proposal for you, but it'll create like a very shitty first draft. Right. And the historical, for example, this In Loving Brotherhood, historical kind of gay motorcycle movie that we're working on. We used it to kind of come up with some of the language, or I attempted to write several of the sections of grant proposals with it, and historically it doesn't know what it's talking about, but like the language around it and how it puts it together was like, there was some interesting bits that ended up in the final kind of treatment. But again, like it has to be human checked. Like you can't just use it to create something, take that thing and go submit it. That's a bad idea.
It is an assistant. And I think, we should just think of it as, up till before ChatGPT, when we talked about Siri and Alexa and things like that, we called them our digital assistants, right? Even PDA, personal digital assistant, we used to call a Palm Pilot in the iPhone. It is an assistant in the sense that, many of us are used to having, let's say if we're fortunate enough to have an assistant, associate producer or assistant editor or whatever, secretary in the business world, who you ask to, pull together some information for you and perhaps even write a rough draft of something just to get you started. They do some of that hard work at the beginning. This is unbelievably capable assistant to the point where sometimes it actually is giving you things. It's somewhere between assistant and consultant, because it will give you ideas that you don't, in other words, it's read all the grant proposals and all the discussions about grant proposals that have ever been written on the internet. It has in its database. And so one of the reasons it can write you a pretty badass first draft of a grant proposal is it will use some of the most common and the most useful phrases that people have ever used in all the grant proposals that have ever been written. And so you might see these phrases that you didn't think to write. The other thing is it can do insane things, like you can say, this is what my film is about. You can upload, you can say, here's a synopsis of my film, here's my budget, whatever, and it will bring that information into the first draft. So you can see your project combined with ideas for ways you can describe it that you wouldn't have thought of otherwise.
Well, and
it's really, really fast. I mean,
oh my
this
God,
is all
it's instantaneous.
out in seconds. Yes.
It's insane.
And I mean, backing out of ChatGPT for a second, I would say that, and even, some of the most common tools that we hear people talking about are ChatGPT and Midjourney, which is an image generator. But I would even back out of that further and be like, what are the kind of classifications of AI tools? And I wrote up a little list that was like, basically there's content generation tools like the text to speech, text to, images, text, and like today Runway just announced their Gen 2 beta, which was like a text to video in 4-second clips, and like that's available to, and there's generating content, there's synthesizing content, like we were talking about. It's like you can put in a transcript of a YouTube video and it'll give you that in bullet points, or anyway, think about that. You can query content, like, so for example, there's no way to do this quite yet that I know of, but like, let's say the filmmakers who made TV Junkie and they had 3,000 plus hours of footage, if they were able to take the 3,000 plus hours of transcripts into their own language model, you could use ChatGPT to essentially query that and query your own footage and come up with like thoughtful things. So that's querying content. There's processing content. So that's what I would say, all the post-production stuff, you can color grade, you can, there's all this VFX work, there's all this audio post work, there's editing work that you can do. And then last thing is curating content. So like, let's say like a Google alert times like 10, like there's a tool called Auto GPT that you can use to like basically create a lot of custom alerts to bring more of the kind of news and information across the web that you want into your inbox, or so you can, again, that's a helpful research tool. So I would say like there's these categories of tools. There's tons of tools in each one, but we tend to think of AI, we tend to think of how do we generate content, like how do we use it to like create images, like a lot of the copyright stuff is around content generation. But when I think of AI as an assistant as a filmmaker, you have to think beyond the kind of generation box.
So you mentioned that it can access all the grant proposals ever written. How does it access that? You said it doesn't hook up
only ones that have been posted to the internet. So it has the public internet. So if you've posted, whatever, anytime there's discussions, it also has every book that's ever been published about how to write grant proposals. I can give you one slight I'd say one thing that's amazing about ChatGPT and is that you don't need to know anything. You don't need to know the correct words. Unlike in the past, how do you talk to the computer? This is the most mind-blowing thing. You can just ask it in your own language and you can feel it out. That being said, some people have said, I'm not sure whether it's apocryphal or not, but I've tried it and it's been helpful. You can do interesting things like ask ChatGPT I'd like you to be an expert in grant proposal writing. And what that seems to do is tell it to kind of focus its where it's going to draw data from the best books on it or something like that, as opposed to just asking it about grant proposals. That may be a subtle difference, I don't know, but it's kind of among the fun kind of things you can do.
I think one of the fun things that's going to happen with ChatGPT is more around this personalization of language models. Like the wide language model is super interesting to play with, and there's a lot of good stuff that it can do. But once you can personalize and like basically like upload the transcripts of all the content you just shot, like once you can take all that content and put it into your own database and have it query your own content, I think that's going to be a massive game changer for how we think about post-production workflow and how we think about, how to understand the footage we filmed. And beyond, like, especially like, I think there's a difference between, fiction and documentary, whereas in documentary, a lot of times we're doing these broad-based interviews, we're discovering kind of as we go, our shot lists aren't so set in stone as we're creating content. And so, there's that kind of writing period that happens between filming and editing that I think that having access to all of your content as a queryable database is going to be huge.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Can I just add one quick thing, just because I see a lot in the chat. I'm just seeing the chat fly by really fast, but I see a number of people using the words "don't do this for that," "don't," "it's bad for that," "it's this," "it's that." And I just want to say that try it, just sit down and take the time. I think, first of all, you'll find it kind of fun, but don't rule it out. I in those kinds of comments, and just a fraction of the chat, but in those kind of comments, I hear echoes of the exact same thing I heard when nonlinear editing, when computer editing came out, when the first Avid and the Media 100 and all those Edit Droid and all that stuff was happening in those days. So much talk I remember about, I don't want to touch it, this is no good, this will ruin filmmaking and all that kind of stuff. It's just a tool. And it is, I will say this, it is a tool you need to understand, because it's gonna very quickly be everywhere. And there are lots of things what's incredible about it is its flexibility. And so you as an individual person thinking about things you'd like to do, just say, I wonder if it can do that. And you'll be surprised at what it can do.
Like you said, it's fun. I mean, you could just spend
Yeah.
hours going down that rabbit hole and, have to slowly crawl out. Let's talk a little bit about GPT-4, which is sort of the next evolution of it. And what's the difference? And is it around? Is it being used yet? Or when will it be used?
GPT-4 is essentially just a more powerful version of GPT 3.5. But the reason ChatGPT blew up was because each time, basically, each version of GPT that they've done is basically give it a much larger database or a much more powerful computer or a much more memory. They basically increase the size of the power of the computer, we can just say. And when they crossed some threshold that completely surprised the creators themselves, they were using GPT-2 and it was fine. And they went to GPT-3 and it was great. And to GPT 3.5 or whatever. And suddenly they were like, whoa, the quality of the answers they're getting back is really astounding. And that's why they felt, let's try releasing it to the public and see what the public can do with it. GPT-4, so if you play with GPT 3.5, if you play with ChatGPT, the default use, after a little while, you'll find it's kind of repetitive. It might do some things. It might very quickly forget what you're talking about and ask you, say, I don't know what you're talking about. Can you remind me? And things like that. All it boils down, really, the main, and maybe Basil, you might have more on this, but like the main difference is simply that GPT 3.5, ChatGPT, the original, the OG, can remember about 4,000 words, maybe even I think it's about remembers 4,000 words. And what it does is when it's searching its entire database for things, it's using this 4,000 word memory to look for the next word. And that's how it kind of works. GPT-4 can remember, I'm not sure the current version is this powerful, but it will remember up to 32,000 words. So
yeah, so in your chat that you're having with it, it has a memory of what you're saying. So you can continue to query it. So for example, the other day I was reading some kind of prompt architecture guides, and one of them said, oh, write an entire, like have it write an entire book, and here's how to do that. And for fun, you know, just to test it out, I had it write a 14,000 word book, and it did it. It wrote a 14,000 word book. It took about 17 prompts to get it there. And it was not a good book, but it had a memory of each chapter, of all the content of the chapters. It was able to build from chapter to chapter. It created the title, it created the chapter outline, and then it created all the work from those chapters. Like, you know, I just threw like a initial prompt at it. And then, so yeah, it can remember that, and then it can build off of that. Which was interesting, and there's a lot of potential uses for that. But it's not that just that it has more data in the language model, it's that it's a more powerful language model. And OpenAI said that in their development, like right now, they're not trying to build ChatGPT 5, whether they are or not, who knows, but like, they're not going for a bigger language model. I think they're going for or deeper understanding in the current language models.
Yeah, but basically the bottom line is, I'll just boil it down to this for anyone who just doesn't. Here's the most important thing. GPT 3.5 seems pretty damn smart in many ways, dumb in some ways, really smart and insightful in other ways. It's eerie, right? GPT 4 is like, whoa, it seems so much smarter. And they've done things like show that GPT 3.5, when they let it take the bar exam at some state or whatever, you know, and it got like 10% right. GPT 4 basically got 90% right on the bar exam. So the GPT 4 feels a lot more intelligent. The mechanics of that is, you know, again, up for discussion, but it really seems like you're talking to a pretty smart person.
Obvious question, why should we be using ChatGPT if we can be using GPT-4?
GPT-4 is ChatGPT. It's just a different model. You basically have to pay, right? If you pay for it, then you can select which language model you're using. And if you're not paying, you get the standard. Again, like, I think that it just depends on what you're getting out of it. And I think we've spent a lot of time on ChatGPT, but ChatGPT is just a small amount of like the tool set of like generative AI or AI that can help filmmakers. So I think that, you know,
let's talk about some of those things. I asked both of you guys to come armed with like a few recommendations of apps, you know, the ones that you find most useful in your work. We talked about Midjourney, of course. Do you want to explain what that is and some of these other apps you're using?
I mean, mostly when Midjourney is like a text to image generator. And I think other people probably use it way more than like I have fun playing with it, but I don't know that it's going to be like instrumental into the work that I'm doing for now. But I think there's a lot of ways what I think is interesting is more like Adobe just came out with their Adobe Firefly, which is their AI tool. And at NAB, they kind of pushed out this video to show what it can do in Premiere. And one of the interesting things that was in that video was like someone selected all the scenes of their scene outline and had it auto-generate storyboards. And in a storyboard style, it auto-generated storyboards. So all of a sudden they were able to kind of use that text to image model, like similar to what Midjourney is doing, but directly in Premiere. So like all of a sudden in Premiere as an editor or as a filmmaker who's not just an editor, you have all these different tools that can kind of, you know, be an assistant in your filmmaking process.
I would say basically stock photography and pretty soon stock video is just dead, just completely dead in the water. Because you can now generate images. First of all, there's a certain look to stock photos, right? And a lot of them are kind of cheesy and things like that. Certainly you can do bad. You can use Midjourney or Adobe or any of the art generating AI tools. And you can get bad things, you know, bad looking stuff. But there is a beauty to them and a beauty that you can achieve if you just learn a little bit about it, you know, how to make it look like a composition you want. It's
Well, Phil, that
astounding.
brings up a whole other thing of how do we trust images if we don't know whether they're generated by AI or they're
Well, I
real?
think that died with Photoshop, but you're right. It's just dead even more. Just another
Well,
nail in the coffin of that.
So there's an initiative called the Content Authenticity Initiative, and there's a lot of different kind of organizations that are working to try to answer that question. I don't know that we're going to answer that question in this conversation, but I would look into like content provenance and some of the other tools around that. I think content provenance probably, like in my perspective, it has one of the most potentially impactful ways to and what it does is content provenance essentially stamps the image every time it goes through a journey. So like, and they're partnering with, let's say, Canon, for example. So you film something with your camera and there's like a stamp in the metadata of what you filmed that said it was filmed at this date and time, right? And then you bring it into After Effects and you manipulate it and it says, okay, and it was manipulated with After Effects at this point, and it kind of carries through in the metadata this provenance. So like something you generate on Midjourney is not going to have any content provenance. It's just an image with like empty metadata. But where something that goes through this content provenance process will have that metadata. Now, can that be tricked? Maybe, I don't know. But there's, really smart engineers and, journalists and a whole bunch of organizations, tech companies, wherever, working together to try to create that. And I think that in terms of like disinformation, or can we believe what we see anymore, and all of that, like it is a huge issue. And like I think there's going to be a lot of different solutions, and there's going to be a lot of people tricked by disinformation. I think disinformation is going to just like skyrocket with the
If I could open, I'm going to open a door and then I'm going to immediately close it so we don't go through it. I'm opening a door and there's a howling wind outside. And that is the fact that it doesn't matter. I mean, I hate to be super cynical about it, but like they're not interested in getting evidence. They believe what they see what they want to see, right? I mean, it's just a whole nother thing. It's like, there's evidence for plenty of things that are on television these days that what you're seeing on television isn't true. It's a straight up lie, but there's a lot of people listening to that and they don't care. It doesn't matter. So I do remember, it's funny when we talk about the idea of how can we trust images. I remember some years ago, the New York Times or the Washington Post publishing a photo that showed a rocket, Saddam Hussein launching rockets, right? And it showed three rockets launching simultaneously. And the incredible discovery was that there was only one rocket, and someone in the Iranian propaganda ministry had used Photoshop to duplicate the rocket, and there was all this talk about how, Photoshop was going to be the end of the world. And it really was, in a sense. You can't trust anything. I think the only thing you can do is, ultimately, I don't think any of these individual tools are going to make that much of a difference because it's so easy to get around. I think context will be the difference. You have to be able to say, I trust this newspaper, or I trust this filmmaker, and believe that person has done the rigorous work to tell a story.
I kind of feel like we're shrugging off this idea of like people won't be able to, know the truth, or, I mean, isn't that what we do as documentary filmmakers? Seek out the truth and point out the truth, and
I think that's what we try to do, but I don't think that, I mean, there's a lot of people who have who have an invested stake in creating content that pushes like whatever agenda they have. And, I don't think that, I guess to my point, I mean, I think disinformation has just scored a massive tool set that can help push it faster and further across social media. And I think that we will witness more and more of that. I think there are tools and people and organizations who are working to slow that or stop that, but it's and I think to Phil's point, like you can trust different people and different news outlets, but I think we need I think there needs to be a systemic approach to thinking about how we, verify what's real. And I think there's these tools or organizations like Content Authenticity Initiative. And then there's also how do we continue to, help people be media literate? How do we continue to help, train ourselves in media literacy? Like those two things are super important, and all these AI generated tools make them even more important.
Don't you feel like, in a sense, the genie's out of the bottle? That I mean, how do we regulate this? Is it too late to regulate? I mean, it's like, do you trust?
I don't think regulation is the answer. I mean, I think that, for instance, I trust Alex Gibney. Should I? I don't know. But when I watch his documentaries, I trust that what he's giving me is like really held up to a journalistic standard, right? I trust Ken Burns, or, his daughter, and different people like that. So I think that, and then what am I depending on? I'm depending on organizations like the Motion Picture Academy, or Doc NYC, or people like that, to be also vetting in some ways the filmmakers, right? So there's a chain of trust there, and so that works for me. I don't think we could. I mean, am I ever going to go hunt down every individual image and see whether that's real or not? I don't think so.
What about, should we be concerned as artists, about copyright infringement of our work? That it's, out there and being, reshapen in some way out of our control?
I think that we are about to see a massive amount of IP lawsuits, and that are going to really kind of tell this story. And I think that this story around copyright infringement with AI tools is only just starting to like kind of formulate. And but yeah, I think we're going to see a lot of lawsuits come out. I think the Universal Music Group lawsuit against Google's music language model is like a first, like one big one that is going to be interesting to watch. So I think there's, this Drake song that was just created and, went public, and, and there's like a lawsuit to pull that, and it got pulled from Spotify and Apple Music.
15 million views on TikTok.
Right. And beyond that, like there's questions about like, well, it wasn't actually Drake, and it wasn't actually, so is it protected? Like, does Drake's IP cover the sound of his voice? And I think a lot of this stuff is going to be litigated, and beyond the litigation, like I think that we as documentary filmmakers have a personal responsibility to understand what content that we use from these tools and how we put it out there. So if I'm saying I want to create images in the style of, I don't know, Wes Anderson, for example, and all my images are in the style of Wes Anderson, I'm personally making a choice to make sure that I'm, basically using AI to remix Wes Anderson's style. And if I put that out, like, that's just something like my personal responsibility. Like, so do we have the personal responsibility to not do that? I think that's an interesting question.
Would you also feel a responsibility to contact Wes Anderson and say that you're using content based on his work?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, I think that do I personally, if I created a Wes Anderson lookalike movie, once AI generation gets even further along, I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm still interested in where this is going. Like, I think that it's important for people to get paid for their work. I also think there's a long history of art replicating other art. But I think the people who lose out are mostly like marginalized filmmakers. And so I think that there's an importance for us to like continue to figure out how people get paid for their work, especially when their name is being named in the work itself, or in the creation of that work. I don't know how that's accomplished.
I would I don't know that I believe, because I'm not settled on any of these issues, right? They're all sort of up in the air. It's so new. But if I would just say, here's a counterpoint to that, counter argument to that, from the tech people's point of view, might be, let's say I'm going to make a movie, right? And I decide I want to do it in the style of Wes Anderson, right? Or I tell my set designer, I love Wes Anderson, or usually I'm saying more like Stanley Kubrick or something, right? It's like, let's go find it. And so what do? You go and you would watch all their movies, right? Or you'd open up a book and you'd look at all the images, and you would use that to inform your thing. And then there's nothing illegal about doing a movie in the style of Wes Anderson at all, right? And so it's just a style guide. So really, I think there's a counter argument that says, when I ask Midjourney to give me an image in the style of Wes Anderson, all it's doing is looking at all the images that it has in its data that it's ever seen from Wes Anderson movies, and it's giving you a brand new image. Now, the more on the nose copyright violation, we're not really seeing that much, but that would be if you are using exact pieces of an image, So I would say that right now, when people use Google Images to do things, that's massive copyright violation across the board. This Midjourney also, it reminds me, in the early days of Photoshop, we used to say you could basically scan a famous image, and then if you applied enough filters to it, turned it into a pencil, turned it into this, morph it, turn it around, at a certain point, you were okay. You weren't, you'd use that as the thing as a starting point for your art, but you had created your own work on top of it. So,
like, for example, we're doing a historical documentary, and there aren't too many images of the time period or something, and we use Midjourney to create images. Do you feel like we have an obligation to put, like, little super at the bottom? This is a
So I've done many things with reenactments, right? I've worked at ABC News for a long time, and I've done my own documentaries for History Channel and things like that, where we've had reenactments. As the technology has gotten better and better, the realism of those reenactments, whether they're photographs or video, has gotten better and better and better, right? Suddenly we could apply filters to things to make it look like 16mm film from the 70s or whatever. I think there's filmmakers like James Marsh, in Man on Wire, for instance, incredible example of and his other movie about the monkey, I can't remember what it was called, but he does reenactments that he is mixing actual archival images with images that he's created, and he's not telling you one way or the other. Now, that's just a whole nother discussion, and you could say it's okay, those stories are not, it's not about that so much. But I think if you really are trying to make something look like it's a fake image, you should say somewhere. Usually what we say is even just at the very beginning, and this goes back decades on television, you would say the images in this program are recreations, right? That's all you say, stuff like that.
So I just want to point out once again that we opened up a new topic on the D Word itself, the platform on AI, and all of the stuff that's being brought up, both the specific creative and technical uses of AI, as well as the ethical implications of it, are all being discussed there, and a lot of the links and information will be posted there. We're also recording this for the D-Word's YouTube channel. It should be up early next week, and all of those links that Julie's listed with information and lists like Basil's spreadsheet will be in the session notes of that, and also posted on the D-Word. So don't worry if you're missing some of the specifics, but do save the chat. I highly recommend it. I see a bombardment, a tsunami of information floating there. So before we're about to open it up to questions from people here, we have, I think, about 400 people attending. Excuse me. So folks, if you do have questions when we open it up, try and use the raised hand function, and I'll take a look and call on you in the order that I see it. Let's get back, though, to a second for those apps. I don't think we got to too many of them, and I know there's more. If you could, again, tell what have been useful apps and how you've used them would be, I think, super helpful.
Well, one thing for me that I'm finding interest in is emotion tracking, like AI emotion tracking tools, where you can basically have someone watch a section of your video or a cut of your film or whatnot, and then they agree to turn their camera on, and it kind of analyzes the emotions that like on their face while they're watching it and gives you a data output. So if I have, let's say 100 people watch like a 15-minute segment of a film, then I can know across those 100 people, like at what moments people are, let's say at minute 7, 70% of the people are bored. Well, I need to know, is minute 7 a place where I want people to be bored, or do I need to do something else? And how does that influence my edit decisions? I think that's one of the more interesting things for me, beyond all the things people have been saying about ChatGPT, or that we've been saying about ChatGPT and Midjourney and all that. But I think the motion tracking is really interesting.
I would say at minute 7, you definitely don't want people bored. Maybe minute 70, but 7, you're really in trouble. There's another use to that. And this is how what's crazy about all these technologies is that something comes out has one particular use and then it immediately transforms to another use, or you just think of it. There's another use for that, which is these same tools that can see faces and figure out the emotions on their face can be used to to analyze your own footage. So if I have, 500 hours of verite footage and as often happens, I'm looking for a place where I have a nice shot of my character kind of looking distressed, let's say. Show me shots of them distressed, and then boom, instantly, you'll have all those shots. It's kind of and not just that, mad. I mean, it's interesting. There's almost like a circle. I've seen these demonstrations of the motion tracking. It's kind of like a circle and a little dot moves around. There might be like 12 different emotions around the side of the circle. And this little dot moves around and sort of, well, it's a little bit of this emotion, a little bit of that. Fascinating. I would just say real quick, I'm actually to me, ChatGPT has been enormously helpful. I've also used it, not just other random uses I've had for it is I'm putting together a montage of, I'm making a documentary about a video game called Myst. And we're pulling together archival of videos on YouTube where people are talking about Myst. And they're, kids play the games, adults play the game, and they record the whole thing and they talk about the game and the history of the game throughout their entire video. So there's like 2.5 hour videos. And the normal thing for me to do would be to watch that, as I would like to do anyway, but watch this 2.5 hour thing straight in real time, and Mark selects and pull out anytime they spoke about the game in an emotional way. However, we could do things like on YouTube, you automatically get a transcript of just about every video that's on YouTube. It's already there. I copy that transcript, I paste it into ChatGPT, and I say, and it has time code in it. And I say to ChatGPT, could you please pull together the most emotional moments from this thing? And I used the words most emotional because I know ChatGPT is actually quite good at finding those moments, and spits out a list of like 20 things with time code. And it was amazing. I will say this, about 1 in 5 of those was genuinely really good for me, but it did as good a job as any assistant or as any editor would have done on their first pass, so astounding. And
before we go to the
instantaneously.
Before we go to the questions, one final question from ChatGPT itself. I promised I would throw in one of them. I have not so far. I didn't try and trick you, but this one I thought was particularly interesting and relevant. And ChatGPT, how do you think AI can be leveraged to improve the accessibility and inclusivity of documentary filmmaking, particularly for underrepresented communities?
Oh, yeah. I would just say it empowers them to make films. And, it's one of the most powerful tools yet that allows us to do things that you could only do if you had a huge budget or you worked for a network or something like that. So in the way the DV camera enabled us to suddenly do things, in the way that the price is dropping enormously on computer-based editing, gave us the ability to edit in the exact same tools that they're using in Hollywood or at the big news networks. This is giving you brain power. That's astounding. You're using the most powerful supercomputers in the world you can access from your place in Nigeria or Malaysia or wherever.
In a sense, it's leveling the playing field.
It's well, I don't think the playing
field. People are going to use the word
level,
democratization a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is like, I would say true up to about 15%. I think there's a threshold, and I don't think it's leveling the playing field. but I think it's definitely making a few more tools more accessible.
But it allows people to get on the playing field who otherwise could not,
That's
which is a huge thing. The digital video, we talked about how digital video was going to change the world, and holy cow, has it, right? If you include the phone cameras as digital video, right, as DV cameras. And what this is going to do is astounding. It's going to give people the power to do what we frankly have only been able to do with our modest budgets, but relatively huge budgets compared to zero, right? By shooting tons of footage and then being able to transcribe it and digest it. You can transcribe it instantly. You can have it, you can query it about meanings that it finds in there or whatever. You can just manipulate it in so many different ways. So it's like having if you turn the D word into a person, which would look just like Doug, it's as if you could have the D word as a person, all the knowledge in the D word and all the interactivity that it has sitting next to you and answering any question you ever want.
And then I'll just add one more thing around actual accessibility in terms of like access to film. Like how do people with just various disabilities watch films? I think that a lot of the AI tools there are tools within like auto sign language tools, like auto transcriptions, like there's all these tools that have been developed or are on the way that make it easier for those filmmakers of us who don't do a good enough job of making sure our films are actually accessible. There are AI tools that can make films more accessible. And I think that filmmakers should do a better job generally of making our films more accessible. But I think that for various disabled filmmakers who are audience members who are wanting to watch films, I think that there will be tools that can be incorporated into a lot of the streaming services and whatnot that can help people consume the media that people.
Yeah, even just a small example of that is like, most of us, we know we should be, when we put an image up on Twitter, we should be entering that alt text information for the visually impaired. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I don't. I'm sure none of us do it nearly as much as we would like to. The AI does it instantaneously. I mean, basically, if you're visually impaired and you're surfing the web with the AI, it'll just tell you anything. The information need not have been entered by somebody else. The AI can look at an image and describe it to you in detail.
Thanks, guys. We have a ton of questions, so let's get at it and we'll hopefully get to everybody. Douglas, unmute your. Just be sure to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hello, human.
Hello. You never know. Hello, people from Brazil. I'm curious about how far are we to have a generative tool as versatile as Midjourney or similar for making moving images from prompts and the mixing of those with real images.
Look at Runway. So Runway, which is a company, has a tool called they released a tool called Gen 2 in beta today, and you can do text to video prompts. It only creates a 4-second image, but I saw someone already posted something that they created within an hour that was like a 32-second nightclub scene of like 8 different text to video prompts kind of cut together of like people dancing and like a shot of like the disco ball and, you know, a DJ on stage and like all this stuff. And it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible. And this is just their beta. And like, I think that we're very close to text to video. I think a lot of companies are working really, really fast at it. And I think there's a huge AI land grab, you know, a huge race to like for companies to try to push this stuff out faster and figure out who can be like the mid journey of text to video. And it's going to happen faster than we can imagine.
I mean, the truth is video is just 30 mid-journey stills per second or 24 for film. And so the another amazing thing about it, by the way, I think it's runway.ml is the website. And I think Runway does it. I know that the Google text to video thing does this. They generate sound as well. So I remember I saw a video of like someone typed in, show me a teddy bear walking across a lake. So it had a teddy bear walking across the lake, and there were splashes every time. There was wind, there was the sound of birds, there was the sound of the rustling of the teddy bear's fabric, and very, very low quality audio. I mean, it sounded like, like an AM radio or something. But again, these things are coming down the pike.
We have, I'm counting 14 questions lined up. So let's try and be really concise and actually give concise answers as well if we can.
Come on, humans.
Yes, Simon.
Thank you. So I've got a question, also very, very interesting. Imagine you did an interview in a foreign language, for example, in Russian or Arabic, that was filmed. So using the latest AI, how accurate would the transcription be? First question. Second, a translation in English, how accurate would that be? I'm talking about the transcription here.
Transcription of English is almost perfect. Sorry, but go ahead. But what do you think about other languages?
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I think it depends on what tool you're using. I think there's a lot of tools out there. I would always have actual human check the work of an AI right now.
Yeah. Well, actually, you should put, that's like a golden rule right now. You absolutely have to check everything. There's no AI is doing anything that can be trusted. So, yeah, without review. Yeah.
Sydney, can you come up on camera and unmute yourself? All righty. Yes, there you are. You're muted though.
Sorry, you caught me when I was literally like about to hop on my bike. I was just gonna say really quickly how I started using ChatGPT literally like yesterday. It helped me generate an entire production schedule for an international feature and also an entire budget, which I thought was really amazing. And it's basically one of those things where like everyone's been talking about, like as much as you input is what it will spit out at you. So I put a line item for like an on-site, like a therapeutical person. I was like, I wanted to make sure that things were like trauma informed. It like input all of this information and obviously pulled from different places and helped generate like a complete, like very detailed list. So that was really helpful. And that's just like how I used it. And also obviously it can help you create like rough draft outlines for docs, and like I think it's really helpful too in terms of like leveling the playing field in terms of accessibility for like grant writing, because like someone was saying in the chat, like a lot of people aren't writers, and so it's helpful to like kind of help you get a jump start on how to generate some kind of like traction on a description for your project.
Yeah.
Great, thanks for sharing that. I would just, as Phil said, double check everything that they spit out at you.
In particular, the rates. I mean, if you're putting stuff in the budget, obviously you want to go online. I would use maybe Bing or some other, or just go to the different guilds and get the actual going rates for people, just the most up to date. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing and have a good bike ride. Gil.
Hey everyone, great to be here, and thanks so much for this really informative conversation. And I have to say, I'm feeling excited and I'm feeling sad and scared. And I just want to share that, you know, I'm a film composer and my focus is on socially conscious film. So I score a lot of documentaries, and as composers, we are starting to see the impact. I think we might be ahead of you on the filmmaker side. We're starting to see the impact of AI generated music and you know, that's starting to replace things. And I can't help but feel that, yeah, we're excited that this is going to make life easier and we can do more for lower budgets, but aren't we just lowering the budgets by doing more for lower budget? And I just feel like there's no end to this. And at what point do we actually say stop and tell the, you know, whoever is ordering the content from us, whether filmmakers or composers, at what point do we say, actually, no, we can't do it for this budget. You need to raise the budget so we can hire human to deliver quality work. So I'm just concerned that we're going to have about 5, maybe 10 years of, hey, life got easier, and then we're all out of a job. and that keeps me up at night. Lots more to say, but I just wanted to plant this here.
I would just want to ask if the music, I don't know, but if the quality of it is the same, because I feel like ultimately, the more time you put into something, the higher the quality. And that ultimately, while an editor could be using AI to generate music, or somebody on the team is using an AI to generate the music, ultimately somebody's going to end up spending a long time tweaking the AI to get that music to be just right. And ultimately, there's no relationship there either. I feel like one of the best parts of working with a composer is that relationship, talking, the person understands the film, you're all working towards the same goal, and the composer goes away and does all this work and comes back with more beautiful stuff. Also sits down and ultimately, if you're lucky enough to have it in the budget, sits down and does a real recording session with real instruments too.
Sure. No, I mean, listen, as a film composer, I have my career, and I personally, you're right. Scoring to picture, the ability to connect with what's happening from a dramatic or, a place of empathy. And, it's a while before, hopefully never, AI can interpret that. But there's also a lot of music being used, for licensing, catalog, things like that, where it's, editing to a pre-existing piece of music. And that is what's being really impacted now. And prices are going down and down and down, or becoming completely non-existent, and musicians are losing income. And
Gil, I'm going to cut you off for a sec because we just have so many questions
sure, of
lined
course,
up. But you make a great point, and I'll just say two of my very favorite musicians who I see in concert, are Laurie Anderson and Zoe Keating, who use technology in their performance. And I think artists are going to find ways of creatively using AI that combines, what can I say, humans and artificial intelligence in interesting, provocative ways that open up a lot of questions.
I think that the point is true, that there are a lot of I think that there are a lot of contracts that are not going to be, that are I think that a lot of people are going to lose contracts at first, and it'll be an indicator for what kinds of jobs actually people need to go in and go find another path. And the job paths of 2 years ago or 5 years ago or 10 years ago are not the job paths of 10 years from now. And it is sad. And it is, and it is a total reality of this moment. Again, back to that storyboard tool, all the storyboard artists who probably saw that are well, fuck, there goes that income, especially, and filmmaking is one thing, but in the corporate advertising marketing world, where companies are really racing to get cheaper content, those industries will be deeply, deeply affected by this. And, all people get contracts in that.
Basil, Phil, can you guys stay beyond 1:30 for a while? Because there's just so much. So, okay, great. That would be super helpful. And Sonali, you make a great point in the chat. You direct message me. Can you raise your hand and ask that question directly? I just don't want to hog the time. I've asked a lot of questions already. Teresa.
There, quick question. And I believe, Basil, did you put in the Facebook chat that you were experimenting with AI? Was that someone else, AI with Unity or with Unreal? So this is a question, right? Could you elaborate a little bit on briefly, and then we could take it on to the, to the boards. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like AI in Unreal is, is a whole topic in and of itself that, a full deep dive can go into it. But basically, the way that generated basically Mid-Journey style tools used to create backgrounds that kind of Unreal can create extensions of is I get, there's a path in which there's a quicker path to generating, worlds within Unreal that these AI generated tools can help create. And I think that, I think there's too much for this conversation, but I would love to take this offline with you.
Thanks.
Before the next,
are you using it as well or not yet?
Well, I've been working with people who are using it, but I'm not as much of, I'm not deeply an Unreal person, but I work with people who use Unreal, and yeah.
I'd say in my video game documentary, I'm sort of, I'm going out there again in a few weeks to do more filming at the company, and I'm excited to see what they're doing. So, and document.
I just want to point out if for folks who, for one reason or another, maybe they're on mobile devices, can't save the chat. If you email Julie at programs@dword.com, d-word.com, we'll send you a link to the chat. Jimmy.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you all. This has been amazing. I love this topic. And I have two questions. First question is, I definitely want to be more involved in terms of what's going on in this space. If you have any suggestions, Basil or Philip, about communities I can get involved in, I'm definitely like completely like, wow. Also, in terms of how I use AI, for my films, super quickly, I used Otter AI to support in the transcription of everything. So I did have it, a human being did go through it, but the intern also ran it first through Otter AI, which allowed us to turn that around. As a producer, a micro budget producer, the reality is either we did that or we just didn't make the movie. So that was super helpful for me. I also use, I know we don't, on the dreaded, money. Social media on my, because I never liked writing social media captions, any of that. I'm able to post almost every week now because I can use copy AI to come out with a social media post, my website copy, thank you, Black Jesus, my LinkedIn bio, all that stuff. I mean, I'm doing a workshop on Thursday with my team so they can all get their LinkedIn bios done, and they're gonna do it with ChatGPT, running workshops to try and raise money. My crowdfunding language on my crowdfunding page. Thank goodness I don't have to, twist my brain to come up with compelling stuff. And my discussion guide, my 25-page discussion guide is done. I mean, thank goodness.
Yeah.
For me, the stuff I really don't like doing, and I can't explain to a copywriter because they can't understand really in my head. I still sent it to a human being though to up-level it, but it was just, I'm just happy about that. So the final question for you, for both of you, Basil and Philip, is I am most excited about two things in the future for AI. Being able to do a lower budget science fiction documentary, science fiction production.
Yeah.
I believe we'll get there in my lifetime. And I'm also excited about, as a documentary filmmaker, being able to one day pull together complex bits of data. Case in point, 71% of the world's greenhouse emissions come from 100 companies. I look forward to the day I can now really use AI to do the analysis that maybe would require 200 people. And I can run that and use that to inform my documentary, my conversations. My question for you both is, what are you most excited about in the landscape of AI that we don't have that is coming? Thank you, and I'm done.
For me, it's personalization of content and being able to create more kind of rich interactive experiences. Documentaries are such we try to create the discussion around the film, but the documentary itself is like a singular piece of media. And I'm really looking forward to how AI can be used to dig in and have more interactive media.
Yeah, I would just say real quick, as an editor, unfortunately, I think everyone still needs to bite the bullet and pay for human transcription or have your staff do it. The AI just isn't quite there. And, as an editor, you need you need it to be exactly right. And so rather than having AI do it and then somehow do it better on a second pass, it's better just to do that. But the other thing I can just put, what I'm most excited about is, in one word, I would say it's meaning. That the AI already shows signs of being able to do this, but it will understand the meaning of everything you're doing as much as you do, and perhaps even better. And you can talk to it about your film in the way you would talk to a mentor. And it will also be able to bring things together. It will not just be able to say, well, remember in that scene where you filmed this, it'll just play the scene and then talk about it as you watch it. A truly intelligent collaborator. You're muted, Doug, or something.
BJ.
Hey. Thank you, gentlemen. Great presentation. Really quick. Sydney, a couple of questions ago, spoke on creating an outline for a project, which of course is enough to generate a treatment, a pitch deck, and eventually probably lead to a PFD deal or a feature release. So you mentioned like content providence. Can you suggest any other tools or strategies that we could leverage to protect our IP?
I mean, I think it's really going to be tough to protect. I mean, it depends on where your IP is. What I would say is, keep your IP with people who it's safe with right now. But if you're releasing films, if you're releasing media, I mean, look at all the people who have gobs of money and lawyers and the IP that they're using that's getting remixed and put out in different ways right now. I think it's IP protection, I think, is a difficult world.
Yeah, you still do the old-fashioned trick of, if it was a script, print it out, put it in a self-addressed envelope, mail it to the Writers Guild, get it registered, and have it sent back to you, and then you got it marked in time. Blockchain, blockchain. That's the answer. That's a huge part of it. So that's a whole nother topic. But blockchain, as far as registering your IP.
Julie, one more time, can you put in the chat the links to the various articles and information that you've been doing throughout, just one last time. Tony still got it.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just had a real quick comment and feedback. I've been using AI in the latest release of DaVinci Resolve for transcribing, and I've been quite amazed at how quick it works. It doesn't have to be online. It actually does it locally, I think, for privacy reasons. But the other thing I wanted to mention real quick is I actually posed a question in the last couple minutes to ChatGPT, and I asked it, should humans fear ChatGPT? And it responded with this answer: no, humans should not fear ChatGPT. It is essential that humans work to ensure that AI systems are designed and implemented in ways that align with ethical and moral principles, and that they do not harm individuals or society as a whole. So I think intelligently what it's saying is, don't fear AI, fear humans who misuse AI.
Yeah.
But once again, it's proven we have nothing to fear but ourselves.
Yeah.
Thanks. Again, I just would caution everybody to try and be as concise as you can with the questions. There's still like 13 left. Zhu.
Thank you. Thanks, Philip and Basil, for a great, inspiring session. My question is about using AI animation. Have you either or both have experience with using it, and what specific tools did you use, and how did it come out? How did you like the result?
Have you done that, Basil?
Well, I've played around with, I've worked with Absinthe a little bit, but it's a little bit less AI. I mean, it's like, it's different. I think that I haven't done anything with animation that is like super exciting yet, but I think the tools are coming, and
Yeah, one of the cutting edge challenges is getting a consistent character in each frame. The AI tends to redraw each frame, and it often looks like a different person. And people are figuring out how to do that, but that's one of the challenges. But I think it's no different than video generated by AI, right? Animation is just video in a different style. So I think it'll come at the same time.
We were talking earlier this week, you mentioned that you use it at storyboarding. You use stick figures that got animated. Yeah.
Not animated, but so I have a storyboard. A friend of mine is he's a great writer, and he's an okay artist. But he's a great visualizer. He could be a great film director. And so he did storyboards for me based on the treatment that he also wrote. And so we had stick figures, for reenactments, let's say, of certain stories I've got in the documentary. And he did stick figure drawings within like someone walking in a Home Depot and buying a hammer. And so all these, shelves and stick figure in the middle. And I always had assumed I was going to, this is a job issue, but I assumed I was going to find an artist to sort of just redraw those in a little bit more professional looking storyboard style. So I had a nice presentation to investors. And I got curious, and you can upload images to Midjourney and have it work on them. And so I uploaded these stick figure drawings, and unbelievably, it totally turned those stick figures into really nicely done figures. But it could you say do it in movie storyboard style, and so it does it. It's hard to describe it. It was unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, if like the Adobe Firefly presentation they just announced this week, they have a previs tool built into, or when they actually release Firefly into Premiere, it'll have like an auto storyboard and an auto previs tool. So, I wrote a shitty to medium like feature screenplay back in 2004. I'd love to drop that into Premiere and have it create an auto storyboard and auto like previs, and just like be able to watch my shitty film as a previs. Like, that'd be cool. And I think, and again, like, I'm not that kind of screenwriter, but I think that the uses for screenwriters and creators, to the point about a science fiction film being able to be made by AI, I think that there's a way that if you're a writer, you can go into these tools as they're released. And we're at this moment where a lot of tools are there, and people are saying all these amazing things they're using ChatGPT for, but those tools are going to keep advancing. And as they advance, there's going to be more and more for us to use and have at our fingertips. And that the idea that you can take a screenplay and have it auto build into boards with music and previs and all that stuff, and you can watch that and start to gut test it and see if it's actually something worth pursuing, or or iterate on it. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Edward.
Hi, yes. I was wondering if anybody had insights from their legal partners yet on any of the productions on AI, especially in terms of like fair use, which is already a very ambiguous legal thing, but how will AI maybe affect fair use laws?
I think that would only be if you're manipulating the image, right? I mean, in other words, if I'm pulling a clip from a music video or something, I still have to pay for that, unless I talk about it in an educational way at the exact same time it's on the screen. But an interesting question would be, well, can I manipulate it enough so that I'm no longer actually using that video? I don't know. But what do you think, Basil?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think you're right. I mean, I think that fair use is going to be fair use. I mean, it's like the things that people create that they have copyright on, like, ideally you're using it based on those standards. Like, but I think what might happen is people will generate their own, kind of go to recreations more when possible. You can just go and say, oh, there's this one image of this 1904 or 1934 thing that I really need. Oh, well, I can't afford to pay that, so I'm going to go generate my own 1934 images that I'll use in my film. So I think it'll kind of start to circumvent that, using that one access to that one set of clips.
Yeah.
In certain projects.
Don, you're up.
So thank you. So it sounds like I've only used the free version of ChatGPT, but it sounds like with the paid version, maybe you're able to upload some source documents to be analyzed or whatever.
Yeah, you just paste the text, just to be clear. You just copy and paste it. Yeah.
And so I'm just wondering if anyone knows if your queries or source docs are stored. In other words,
don't trust it.
Yeah, your material is now going to become fodder for someone else, right?
Every time you use ChatGPT or Midjourney or Runway or any of these tools, you're training their database.
Yeah.
And you're offering your materials into their database. So you're sort of essentially helping them. Yeah. Totally.
But even Don, I'm not sure if maybe you were also just talking about, like, they tell you when you use these services, they tell you right up front, don't upload personal information. It is being stored in a way. So, theoretically, nothing will ever happen to it, and it might end up getting deleted pretty fast, but you don't know. So if you're nervous about something, don't ever put it on the internet at all, honestly. Anything you put on the internet, assume that everybody can see it, even if it's behind a paywall.
And there will be personal, like, there will be instances right now, there's tools where you can like other kind of plugin related tools where you can upload a PDF and it can analyze the contents of the PDF.
Yeah.
So in that, and there's like other tools that exist, but there will be instances where you can literally upload into a private server and have the ability for things like ChatGPT, whether it is ChatGPT or not, to query that content.
Yeah. Like I said, the Microsoft Office suite, which everyone has had forever on their computers, right? Excel, Word, blah, blah, blah. Now has one extra thing in it, which is an AI. I forget what they call it, but
Copilot.
basically, this
What
stuff
was that, Basil?
It's called Microsoft 365 Copilot.
Oh, Copilot, yeah. Just to confuse it with the programming Copilot, right?
Well, they're all owned by the same. I mean, GitHub's owned by Microsoft, so they're just all part of the same.
Oh, okay. All right.
But everybody's using Copilot. I think Amazon was calling, before they started calling their code thing Code Whisperer, they were talking about it as Copilot. Adobe in their Firefly announcement said it's your editing Copilot. You know,
Yeah.
I think everybody is like using the word Copilot. Microsoft has like paid for a brand on it, but I think there's a lot of people using that to describe what AI can be.
I prefer to think of it as my first officer, more Star Trek.
Okay. First of all, this is my first D-Word meeting, and thank you very much for all this great information. I've been using ChatGPT for a lot of different things, and I gladly paid my $20 a month when I couldn't get on it, when I really needed it. So I just paid the $20, and it's, I think, the best $20 I've spent in a long time.
Yeah, me too.
Question is that I'm working on a film that I'm trying to get down to an hour. So I took the transcript and I was and I pasted it in, and it just keeps kicking it out. What I'm trying to do is find out what's redundant in it, and it just keeps kicking it out, telling me that it's too long.
Too much.
Break
Yeah.
it up.
I know the film's too long, but I that's why I need a help. But
You have to break it up into sections and analyze the sections, and it has a word limit, so you have to break it up.
So what I do is I paste it into any of the word processing programs that when you're looking at the page, it tells you at the bottom how many words you've selected, right? There are some that do that. So I put it in BB Edit's the one I use. But anyway, I just start dragging highlight the text, and I just watch that number go up, up, up. When it gets around 2000, I stop and I copy and paste that in. But it's true that unfortunately, the most useful thing for you would be for it to be able to look at the entire thing at once.
So I can't do that then.
Not there yet. Not there yet.
Okay,
There are other tools that there are other tools out there that you can upload a PDF to a server. I forget what those tools are called right off the top of my head, but there are tools where you can take your transcript, create a PDF out of it, upload to the PDF, and it uses like a chat API that can then query that PDF. And people have uploaded entire books. It's a lot slower than OpenAI's ChatGPT through their platform, but it is possible.
Mabel, you're up next. Yeah, go ahead. You're not muted. Go ahead, Mabel.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Incredible conversation. So much food for thought. It's not necessarily a question, or maybe it is more of a little reflection. So if the world if the world is as is now, and is fair or unfair as is now, especially with marginalized communities of all kinds. So this is how is, with all the benefits, the obvious benefits that AI may have that we are already discussing, how is this going to really further contribute to the marginalization and, let's say, colonization of the world? Because it's been pointed out in Code Bias, the film, and somebody mentioned here in the chat as well, and this article that I link here in the chat as well, that this world is of the makers, that the technology makers behind these companies are predominantly white, predominantly men, predominantly, privileged people of all kinds. So that's a bigger question for me. How's that going to be? How will we, the creators, the creatives, are going to contribute or not to further push that into one direction or the other? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to solve any of these issues. I agree. I agree with what you're saying. I think it will. I think that it's been already pointed out so much that the bias within a lot of these generative AI tools matches the kind of biases, within our, these kind of systemic oppression. And I think that we need to continue, in our work, I think it's important for people to analyze the content that they're creating, whether they're creating it in, with a camera themselves or whether they're creating through generative AI, and continue to put out work that reflects the world we want to live in. And I don't think we can rely on these tools to do it for us.
Yeah, I think somebody mentioned, one of the questioners asked before, they were saying that ultimately it's people that make the difference, and it's what people do with the tool. So it gives revolutionaries more tools. It gives fighters for democracy, defenders of democracy more tools. It also gives the enemies of democracy more tools. It also gives the repressive regimes more tools. So I think ultimately it's a bit of a wash as far as the machine goes, but it's really just up to people how they can do it. But I do think we can say that we've seen digital technology and the internet revolutionize the ability of people to unite and fight, right? To communicate, to protest, right, against repressive regimes, to have cameras everywhere in a positive way. So I think there's no need to fear it any more than our current world. But I think here's the thing. The most important thing is, if you believe in something, wherever you fall on the spectrum, if you want to be a dictator or if you want to be a revolutionary, you need to learn these tools and you need to become familiar with them. I think that's important.
Paul, you're up next.
Thanks. Just curious if you could expand on the idea, so much of what people do at entry and mid-level jobs in the industry, whether it's assistant editors or making schedules, like people have been talking about, production schedules, all these things that we kind of do for a living while we're getting started before we're directors and before we're getting our projects fully financed. Seems like those are the positions that'll be the most affected by this, and artists, obviously. And I'm just curious to expand on, especially because it's exponential and it will get better and better, faster and faster, what you think the next couple of years will look like for those of us who do make our living that way. Thanks so much.
I think there are higher risk and lower risk jobs that this is going to affect. And I think that if you're in a higher risk category, I think that the push to use a kind of HR, a corporate HR term, to the push to reskill is going to be pretty big. I think that if you're already seeing AI affecting the contracts that you get, then I think that that's a time to start being okay, well, how is this going to go, and what are the other options, or how can I boost my own ability to use this? I think I've seen in the advertising industry, creative directors becoming prompt engineers, and starting to think about how they can save their own jobs by becoming experts. And yeah, I think it's going to be a hard time. I think there's going to be this big transitional time where we're going to see jobs change.
And I think if part of your job, I think if you're in a job now, and I am as an editor, we're definitely potentially under fire from the AI. I see as part of my job, and anyone's job, is to always know the latest technology and to know it really well. I mean, the better you know, if you're an assistant editor and you learn how to use these AI tools incredibly well, the producer, even though they could ask ChatGPT to do something, they're not going to have the time or the knowledge to actually use these tools incredibly well. It's just a tool, like an Avid or like searching Google or things like that. So the better you learn them, the more likely you are to at least be on the top of the heap as the changes come.
We have 9 more questions lined up, ending with Lisa, and I just want to say we can't take any more. So if you have any more questions, put it in the chat, and maybe we'll, get to them beyond this session somehow, or go to the D word where we're continuing the conversation.
Yeah, what I would, sorry, Doug, I just want to quickly throw in, like, if people want to connect, I think that Philip and I are both, on the D word. Please put stuff in, like, we can continue discussions on that AI channel. If anyone wants to hit me up on LinkedIn or any of the social stuff, like, happy to connect on this stuff. I know I'm seeing people drop out, so I just want to say that for people.
Yeah, likewise.
Thanks, guys. Danya.
You know what? I actually, I'll stand down. You guys sort of just addressed my question in your previous response. So if somebody else wants to ask a question, I defer to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Sonali.
Yeah, I actually think that it's really problematic to just say, like, this is a tool, just like a camera or just like Avid. I think that this is not just a tool. Like, who manufactured this tool? This tool is biased. This tool is like inherently racist. And so it's not like, oh, I can just take this tool. I mean, I'm using this technology too. I'm trying it out, trying to figure out, like, what is it that I can use? But I think that we have to understand that this is not just a simple tool like a pencil or a camera or a software like Avid or whatever, like we can just pick up and use to, it's not in the control of a human being. And I just want to really point out that we have to think about, like, the tool itself is like problematic. Like, it's not about who picks up the tool and what they do with it, but it's the tool itself that we really need to examine. And I think that's really, really important in this discussion, is like, why are we not why are we just having this conversation and saying, oh yeah, it's just a tool? It's not just a tool.
Yeah, I would say that I agree. And I think that it's not, I think that there are people having this discussion, and we haven't had it in this 90 minutes or so, and I appreciate you bringing it up, but I think that we're going to see people kind of address this in a myriad of ways. In some ways, these tools are going to go forth, whether these discussions happen or not, in their biased form. And in other ways, people are going to affect data models, and I think that different language models are going to kind of be shaped by people putting in their effort to, like, deal with the systemic bias that incorporating these tools. But it's definitely, there's no perfect system in this, and it definitely replicates what we've seen before.
Yeah, I think personally, I think the only way these things change is if they're these companies who put out these tools are under threat of lawsuits by organizations or associations or groups.
Yeah.
I think there's so many people who work in AI who acknowledge that they think they're working on something that will lead to the downfall of humanity. I think I saw a survey of 36% of AI workers felt that way in a Stanford study. And but there's, we live in a capitalistic society, and the companies that do this are, going after the money and not thinking of the implications, which is one reason why I think this is both hugely exciting and terrifying at the same time. Right. And I think liability is the key, because it's not going to get legislated. So companies, the first time Disney sues Microsoft for copyright infringement or something, then maybe some action will be taken. But, I just think it's too far past being able, are you going to rely on Congress to legislate? These guys don't even know what the internet is. So
right. Yeah, I think it's important. This is sort of the opposite end of the scale from the way we've been talking about it, sort of from like the experience of using it at the keyboard end. But you're talking about, also all the way back at the database end or the programming end and the headquarters, what's going on there. And it's important to remember, yes, this tool, or artificial intelligence in general, is on par with the media. It's a new part of the media. It's on par with social media. So it's, you know, as we know, that Facebook, we need to be careful about the way Facebook can damage our society, the way Google may be damaging our society as while also helping it in some ways. The AI is another player in this. It's just a whole new thing that's just arrived. It's in that category, and that's important. The last thing I would say is just to be honestly, I think really, really big is I do believe this is the arrival of an alien intelligence. An alien makes people laugh, but this is the arrival of a non-human intelligence, and that's what the people who make it call it, on this planet in our civilization. And it's here, and it's interacting with us, and we are interacting with it. You can make all kinds of, like, you can say, well, is it really sentient? No, that doesn't matter. As far as the way we interact with it and where it's going to be in a year or two, it acts as if it's this intelligence that's here. And who is that? And there's going to be multiple of them, right? There'll be many or several of these intelligences in the world, and we have to ask who wrote that intelligence, who created that Oz, you know, that Wizard of Oz that we're talking to, and think about that. But it's as important as that, is that essentially we're going to be interacting with something that we've spent our entire lives not having to do or not having the ability to do.
Thanks, Sonali.
Like a good documentary.
Yeah. Folks who are not, please mute yourself if you're not like about to ask a question. Malcolm, you are up next.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for this outstanding discussion. All the majors. It's my first time here. I'm coming to you from Japan, where it's going on 3 o'clock in the morning. And,
whoa!
This vision of Mount Fuji in my background is green screen, if you want to talk technology. I'm a 53-year-old veteran broadcast journalist. I started CNN in Japan for Ted Turner. I came here with CBS News as a foreign correspondent. And I got to tell you, I'm not that old, but I've been in the game 53 years. I started when I was 19 in Omaha, Nebraska. And within the first week, I make this point not to be sarcastic or cynical, but my superiors told me, well, Malcolm, this is broadcast journalism, and we have one rule here. God gave us eyes to plagiarize. And I'm going, what? That burst my bubble, you know what I'm saying? But what he was representing is the fact that I'm a writer. I'm a pretty good writer. I can condense a 2-page newspaper article into a 90-minute on-air production and own the copyright. So to the extent that I have written thousands of stories, brief broadcast kinds of reports, what facilitated it was the fact that I went into the wire room and pulled the AP wire copy or the UPA wire copy and it took the knowledge in and then condensed it into the format required for my particular medium. So there is no fear except for fear itself. And the horse is out of the barn anyway. We're not going back. I agree with that. I like your tone, Philip, because it's an opportunity. And to the extent, as a writer, I laugh at people say, oh, no. The response is determined by the conciseness and preciseness of your prompt. I'm having so much fun. I'm ready to fire everybody. I'm joking, but I'm not joking. I have a small enterprise. Yeah, no, I have a small enterprise here in Japan, but I'm saying no. But to your point, Philip, I joke and say I'm ready to fire everybody, but instead I'm ready to require everyone to get smart on AI prompting to facilitate and enhance the functions that they provide for me as a leader.
Yeah.
So nothing to fear but fear itself. And listen, I'm a self-taught pianist. It's my hobby. I'm 73 years old, retired, been in Japan 47 years, longer than I ever lived in America. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska. But one of my passions is jazz piano. So as you were talking,
sorry, Malcolm, I got to cut you off a little bit. We've still got 4 questions, and we're way over time.
I'll make this brief.
Okay.
As an example of how you can be creative with it. As you were talking, I've never written a jazz song in my life, but while we're chatting, I prompted this thing to compose a sheet music with the chord progressions along the lines of Thelonious Monk in 4-piece 12-bar blues jazz. And I'm looking at a song here I just wrote.
Yeah.
And I'm going to record it and play it. That's the input I want.
Thank you, Malcolm. And you win the most dedicated award for the evening. Thanks. Luke, you're up.
Hey guys, hello from Berlin, and thank you so much for this discussion. It's been amazing. My question is on a bigger picture in terms of how the sort of generative AI works. If you zoom out, are we looking at a basically closed loop in the fact that it's drawing from a set, like a very decisive amount of information? And from this point onwards, we're now adding to the pool information that might have been generated by an AI. I don't know if that question is clear enough.
I mean, I think it's something that's discussed within the data kind of language model building community of, if generative AI is scouring the web and the web starts filling up with generative AI, like what does that do to it? I think that's something that's a possibility and people are looking at that. I don't know that we've reached the point of a closed loop system right now. I think there's a lot more data that can be fed into language models. And I think there's going to be large language models. I think there's going to be small language models. I think there's going to be personalized language models. I think there's a lot of ways we're going to see databases transform, and the ability for this kind of chat to function within those different databases.
Yeah, and just to be a little bit technical, I would just say that it's not a closed loop at all, in the sense that the neural network, the brain that the computer uses, is so complicated. Literally, the people who created it don't know exactly what goes on, but the one thing we do understand is that there are what they call emergent properties. So it generates, each time you ask it something, you get a new thing from it. It does not repeat itself. So in that sense, it doesn't repeat itself any more than nature repeats itself, right? It doesn't do it exactly. It kind of continues to give you new forms of things.
Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Sorry if I'm not, but Tagi?
Yes, Tagi, hi. It's my first D-Word event, and it's definitely the very best I've ever joined. Fantastic discussion. Thank you so much. I've been watching a lot of TikTok videos about AI and how it's going to affect everything. And the one area that they talk a lot about is how it's going to kill off people in marketing. So forgive me if you've already discussed this, but I want to share some information about how I've been using AI, ChatGPT in particular, in marketing a film, and then ask a question related to that. So we are relaunching our film 253 in the summer in a theatrical re-release to mark an anniversary. I gave ChatGPT the synopsis for the film and told it a little bit about the film and asked it to write a press release for this relaunch, which it did a fantastic job, better than I could have written. I then asked it to work out a schedule for the launch, working back from the actual release date, and give me a social media strategy and a social media schedule for when to post, what to post. I then asked it to do a job description for a social media manager. It did that, and the salary, it did everything. And I was blown away by how he did all of that in half an hour. Something I would have probably had to pay thousands of dollars for to a marketing or a publicist campaign team.
But we don't know whether you can trust it. That's the question, none of this stuff has been tested. Everyone's very excited about the default output of something, right? But we've not put these, I think within a year, one thing, we're going to be kind of exhausted, just the way we got kind of tired of Siri and Alexa at a certain point. It's like, okay, it does the same thing every time, it's basically regurgitating the most basic tools for press releases. They all sound the same now, So we don't know yet, but I think ultimately someone who's really good at their job, whether they're an artist or some other kind of thing, is really what makes the difference between those of us who are professionals and a machine, is that we tweak the number of tweaks we do, the number of improvements we do towards some idea. And I actually do that. I'll have ChatGPT write a story for fun, and then I will use ChatGPT to slowly tweak it. But ultimately, you got to put in a lot of time. And so I don't see the head of I don't see an executive at an advertising agency suddenly firing all these people that work below them because they're going to sit there and use ChatGPT all day. No way.
But there is a world in which
There'll be fewer people though, I think.
Right, a creative director who used to operate with a copywriter and a designer and whatever, a small team, turns into just the creative director who is also a prompt engineer.
Yeah. Or sadly, what we saw with editing, that schedules just got, when Avid came around, our schedules got dramatically shortened because they said you can do it faster. I was like, okay, so we do. It's going to be the same with this. You can now write so many more press releases in one day. Therefore, I need 1/10 the number of press release writers that I had.
And you only can read so many press releases in one day, so you need ChatGPT to summarize them all down.
Right.
Actually handle.
Trishwati, I see your comment and others, and I just want to let you know that I think there's another discussion to be had that will keep in mind about this larger issue of inequality being baked into the tool and what might be done about that. So just know we've taken note. Kevin, then Lisa. Lee, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to get to you. I said earlier that Lisa would be the cutoff for questions. So take it away, Kevin.
Hi. So one thing that I don't think has been mentioned here is ChatGPT's ability to code, which I'm very excited by. I discovered just a few days ago that I could do After Effects scripts, which I've never known how to do because I don't know how to code. And I just typed in, make the glow effect on this text flicker as if it's a projector. And it just spit out code, and I pasted it in After Effects. And then I typed in, make it slower, and it changed it. And just realized there's so much potential there. And I know that there's people, I haven't tried this, but like creating their own personalized software programs, just spits it out. And that's amazing to me. So, yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. Lisa, and then ChatGPT will be asking the final question. Go ahead, Lisa.
Doug, thank you for catalyzing this conversation, and thanks to our guests. My head is spinning. I just wanted to say that DPA, Documentary Producers Alliance, is in the early stages of planning an event about ethics in AI, and we'll try and weave in inequity bias to it. But so I had a question I think you guys answered, and then I have a follow-up to it. So if I put in, people are talking about generating decks and proposals and treatments or first drafts, but that's all proprietary information, right? So you're saying that nothing we paste into AI is safe, right? It could be hacked. It lives somewhere, right?
Could be. I mean, just in the sense that you put things on Dropbox, it could be hacked.
Yeah. Okay. Well, then I guess if that's the case, I guess what I want to put out is a sort of a provocation to funders and supporters, media arts organizations. Like I'm thinking systemically, then perhaps media arts organizations like Sundance, et cetera, could create some sort of protected, I don't have the language for it, like a VPN for independent filmmakers, right? Something that could be more protected, so we'd feel safer pasting our stuff in.
You don't need that. I mean, you could just use a VPN, but that would be the solution there. But in terms of actually pasting this stuff in, I would say that, look, the greatest companies, banks, have security, they get hacked. So it's just sort of like, it's just unfortunately a fact of life. So you have to gauge for yourself the level of comfort you have with putting some particular thing in there.
So you think it's basically overkill unless we're making Welcome to Chechnya or something like that?
Yeah, I think that right now, if I was making a film that was like really needed to be confidential and really needed like a lot of security around it, I probably wouldn't use one. I wouldn't like take big chunks of it and paste it into one of these models and use it. I think that there will come a time, and that time's probably really soon, where someone will create like a more secure, more locked down model, one of these where you can upload. I mean, companies are already trying to figure out how to take their own IP, put it into their own company database and have it be queried by people in those companies. Like that will exist. This signal for AI, generative AI, stuff like that will exist at some point. If I would wait.
Microsoft is already working with like enterprise, as they call it, to do things like offer enterprise the ability to create their own database of their own material only in their company's headquarters, room. So it's not on the internet, and that you can write smaller versions of these programs so that you can do a lot of this powerful search. Maybe it's not as incredibly powerful as if you had, the multi-billion-dollar supercomputer that's doing the analysis, but you may not need that to simply look through your own transcripts, for instance. So we may be able to get things, what they call locally stored, right? You're just running it on your computer. It's not connected to the internet.
Well, and someone in the chat just pointed out that Stable Diffusion you can run your own version of. So there are models that you can run on your own. You can set up your own instance.
And there's Llama and things like that.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for the great work DPA is doing. It's great to know they'll be doing an ethics and AI thing coming up. So look forward to that. So GPT gets the final question, which is, how do you envision AI evolving over the next 5 to 10 years? And what implications do you think this will have for the documentary filmmaking industry?
Ooh, Basil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to predict the future. If I were ChatGPT, I would say I don't predict the future. But I think that it is, like I said in the beginning, I think this is a baseline tool. I think that we can expect that all sorts of tools, all sorts of new models, all sorts of new ways of thinking about art and art expression and filmmaking are going to launch from as this develops more and as we get access to additional tools built off of it. I think that within documentary, one of the ways that we're going to see is increased personalization of films and using AI to generate multiple variations. I could see a video player with multiple variations of films that GPT is helping to kind of adjust in the moment based on user preferences. I don't know that independent documentary filmmakers are going to have access to that, but for example, I could see in your Netflix streaming player them using their user data on you to adjust what you're watching in real time as it's happening. I don't think that's going to come in the next 2 years, but I think it'll come at some point. So I think there's increased personalization is the one thing that I'm excited to see how that comes about and how that affects our industries.
I think, like I said, I think this is an arrival of an intelligence in our world, and we're going to be interacting with it constantly, the way we interact with the internet. Just suddenly the internet talks back, or your phone talks back with more intelligence than Siri did. I think we're in 5 to 10 years in a film community. I think we're looking towards seeing an entirely new film language. I think the AI is going to be creating films very soon of its own, with people's, but people will be working with it to create films, but also we will all have fun saying to the AI, just like we do now, write a song, let's just see what it is. I think it's we begin now by being amazed at how AI can create something that imitates things that we already have. And we're judging it based on how well it's doing that. But that's a really poor thing. That's not interesting. I mean, it's helpful, but I think we are going to see the AI is going to be able to show us perspectives on our footage that we never knew before. And it's going to use our footage and its own footage that it will create to put together stories in a way, maybe the hero's journey is in there all the way till 100 years from now or not. But I think that remember when video came around and MTV and all that kind of stuff created a kind of a new language started to happen. If you see the movie, what was the one that just won the Oscar, Everything Everywhere All at Once, this kind of swirling kind of thing. I think AI is going to make, AI already makes, so in Midjourney, you can get AI to make images that are photorealistic, human world, blah, blah, blah. You can also have it create really bizarre things, some of them nightmarish. But imagine what it's going to do when those are moving images with sound, when they're 3D virtual worlds that you are in with sound and texture and all this kind of stuff. So, you can say whether that's good or bad, but I must say from an artistic standpoint, I can't wait to see what these minds do with our visual and sound tools. It's going to be crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Basil and Phil, thank you so much for hanging in there. I think the fact that we're over half hour over and we still have 213 participants. Speaks of not only the tsunami of interest in the subject, but the fact that you guys have been putting out a tsunami of really, really helpful, interesting information. So thank you so much. Just a reminder to everyone, save the chat if you can. There's just hundreds and hundreds of comments and notes and links there. If you can't save it, just email Julie at programs@d-word.com. We will have that list of links and helpful articles that were posted in the chat will be on the D-Words AI topic, as will Basil and Philip will be living there. So I highly recommend. It's for D-Word Pro members only. So if you are not a D-Word Pro member, but you are a documentary professional, sign up at d-word.com. It is free, just like these things are free. So there you are. We'll also a reminder that this whole thing was recorded for our YouTube channel. And the recording, thanks to Michael Lapointe, our editor, we will have this up probably by maybe the end of the weekend or early next week, I think at the latest. So that's just youtube.com @d-word.
Awesome.
And we have like, I think almost 24 of our focused face-to-faces that we've done in the past year and a half up there. So, there you are. Anyway, I hope, thank you all for coming out.
I just want to add, if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can contact me at my website, philipshane.com. You can just contact me through that. Philip with 1 L, S-H-A-N-E.
And you have podcasts, do you not, sir?
I have a podcast called What the If? And if you're interested in AI, so whattheif.com as well, or on your podcast app. A couple episodes ago, I had HAL 9000, the computer from 2001, as my guest in the podcast studio. He was off duty. He was very relaxed. But actually, it's a fun, I made this episode as a fun way to sort of get a handle on AI. It's actually ChatGPT playing the role of HAL 9000 using HAL's voice. And the episode explains everything like that. But if you want to go find that out, whattheif.com. Thank you, Doug. Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Hope to see many of you next week, next Friday, when we do more of, an informal classic face-to-face where we just meet in this large group, but we also break it into go into breakout rooms, and it's all about helping each other with our, seeking help and support for our projects, getting advice, and giving help and support back in return. A lot of great collaborations and friendships have evolved out of that, and hope to see you there. So have a great week. Hope you're not too freaked out by all the stuff thrown at you today.
Hey, this was a historic recording, Doug. I mean, this really marks a place in time. So thank you for having us.
Yeah, quite welcome. And like I said 2 weeks ago, I knew nothing about any of this. It was all just like, this is the way it works here. So
awesome.
Thank you guys again.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.